In this lesson, we're going to finish up our seamless metal texture. Alright, so in the last lesson we had recreated the angle for this seamless texture here. So we have all of these different rivets that are in a specific pattern. They need to make sure we need to make sure that they are lined up horizontally as well as vertically. And so we've done a pretty good job of that, of recreating those perfect angles. And what we need to do now is go ahead and create our texture. So I'm going to clear these guides. I'm going to hit View, Clear Guides, and let's come in and let's pull down our guidelines here. Let's go to the bottom. That's 11 3/8. Let's go to the right at the same amount, so 11 3/8. And let's grab our marquee selection tool and let's select this remainder here on the right. And we're going to right click and we're going to do Layer via Cut. So let's take that cut, pull that over to the left side, and we're doing pretty well here. We do have a little bit of an issue though. We've got a little bit of that shadow showing up here. So one thing that I want to do really quickly is I want to take care of that before we start getting into this process. So let's hit Control, Alt, and Z, and let's go back to just that layer, and let's get rid of this here. So a couple of ways that we can do that. Let's hit Control D. We can hit Control T, and we could expand this out. Because it is a higher resolution image, we still have some room to stretch this out. So if I hit Control and Shift, or I'm sorry, just Shift and Alt, we can drag this out and get rid of most of that shadow. Now one thing that I do want to make sure that I'm doing is that I'm placing these rivets at a specific point. So at the edge of the canvas, I want these rivets to be touching at the top corner. Okay, now I do have a little bit of that shadow, but this can definitely be covered up. So these rivets are all touching the edge of the canvas right here at the top. Alright, so now let's take a look at the bottom, and I want to make sure that I'm recreating that same pattern here. So the top corner of that rivet that's going in this direction should be touching the bottom of my canvas. So I'm going to stretch this back up a little bit, and I have this rivet going in that direction. I want to make sure that this is touching the very bottom of my canvas. There we go. Okay. So actually let's pull that up some. Let's make sure that this corner right here of that rivet is touching the top of that canvas. That'll be a little bit easier to work with. Okay. So now that we have that, let's come down here and let's make sure that that same corner is touching the bottom of this canvas. Okay. So just looking at that. There we go. Now this might be a little off and we'll have to do a little bit of cleanup, but it shouldn't be that big of an issue. Let's hit Enter. Let's back up. And let's take a look at what we have to deal with as far as our seam goes, because we are going to have a few issues. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off this right seam here. Let's cut that off. Let's right click, Layer via Cut, and let's pull this over to the left. Now we went through and you can see right here that these rivets are not going to match up perfectly. And that's going to be an issue for us. So what we have to do is we need to make sure that we have this lined up properly. So I'm going to take this layer 1, I'm going to drop its opacity. And just looking at this, these are not lining up all that well. Okay, it's kind of in a little bit of an in-between here. So what I can do with my layer 0 is just kind of pull that over to the right. Okay, and let's try to get those rivets to match up. And it should kind of look like these have become solid at one point. Okay, so just kind of coming in here. And again, that layer 1 is at about a 74% opacity. Let's drop it down to 50 to really see this. So take layer 0, and just adjust that with your arrow keys. Just try to get these to line up as best as possible. Alright, so looking really good at this point. So with layer 1, let's take that back to 100%. We can get rid of this seam very, very easily. We know that this left seam is going to match up perfectly right along in here. So let's come in here and let's erase this seam here. Now we might have to be a little bit more careful whenever erasing this, because we want to make sure that the rivets look right, that the rust doesn't look too obvious that it's not the same. And you can come in and just take a little bit more care over this. Okay, just making sure that we're getting rid of that seam. And it's doing really well for the most part. Okay, might have a few things here and there that we can come in with the clone stamp tool and take care of, but overall this is looking great. Okay, looks like we've got a little bit of that shadow there. Let's hit Control-Alt-Z a little bit, and we could actually clone that a little bit better. Okay, but we'll take care of that. Alright, now let's merge this down. So merge layers. And one thing that you're going to notice is that we have our boundary set, and we need to make sure that this edge right here is right along this guideline. So I'm going to hit Control and T. Actually, before I do that, let's hit Control and Z, or decline that, and let's grab just this area of our image. And we want to make sure that we are transforming only that. Okay, looks like I was off by a couple of pixels there. Let's do this. Let's crop out anything extra. Let's hit Enter. Now let's come in here. Let's hit Control T, and let's drag that over until that pops right there. Now that is a little bit of distortion, but it's really not going to make that much of a difference on our image. Okay, now let's go ahead and crop out everything else. Hit Enter. Now this is pretty good up to this point. Now we want to make sure that we have our seams set up properly. So let's go to Filter, and let's do Offset. And you'll see that our vertical seam looks really good at this point. Now we need to take care of that horizontal seam. And this is where a lot of the elbow work, the hard work, is going to come in here. You're going to have to come in and do a little bit of clone stamping. Now you won't have to do much because these are matched up pretty well for the most part, but you just need to come in and do a little bit of clone stamping just to get rid of this seam. So grab your clone stamp tool, and you can come in and let's just sample a little bit above and just start to get rid of that seam. Okay, you don't have to do much, just a little bit. Just kind of mix it up a little bit, taking care of that. And just a little bit of work. Okay, not much. So you can see here that this is, fairly easy to take care of. A fairly easy process for the most part. Do have a little bit of that shadow going on here, so I want to just kind of take care of that. May have to do a little bit of painting on this rivet. Okay, we'll take care of that in just a moment. Alright, let's move on down. Let's come in here and let's just clone that. Getting rid of that seam. This looks like another one that we may have to come in here and repaint. But overall, it's not going to be that big of an issue. So you can come in, take care of these lines here, do a little bit of touch up in between, but most of these are going to work really well. Okay, so I'm just sampling one side, coming up, getting rid of that seam. Working on that. Okay, just trying to really work out those seams. And I am working a little fast, just trying to make sure that we're keeping the lesson short enough here. Okay, some of these just have to do a little bit of work, not much. Hit Control-Z a couple of times there. Didn't mean to sample that area. Okay, and sometimes seams just take this little bit of work to get rid of. Now if you want, you can come in and you could do a little bit of repainting here, just trying to get these edges back. So I'm going to grab my paintbrush and let's drop down the size on that. And let's come in here and let's sample this color and let's just kind of paint that in a little bit. Okay, trying to get some of those edges back in there. Okay, you can do a little bit of work and then just kind of blend that in. Just kind of recreate that detail. Now these are going to be some of those smaller changes that you really probably won't see all that much unless you're really looking. Of course, you as the author, the person working on it, is going to notice. Okay, you'll know where to look. But in most cases you won't have that big of an issue. Okay, so just kind of back up a little bit. You can do a little bit of cleanup on those if you need to, but let's hit our filter and offset. Let's go back, and we've created a seamless texture here. Now the big thing with these two lessons that we just covered with the metal is that we want to make sure that we are getting those specific details in there, that we are aligning these horizontal as well as vertical, and that we are making sure that they are matched up on top of one another. So that way we have that specific pattern consistent all the way through the image. Okay, so if you want to test this even more, let's make sure that we've cropped out everything. You can come in and you can shrink this down and make copies and just check to see if it's tiling properly. So with this one, it should be done fairly close. You might want to do offset again, do a little bit more painting on that one horizontal seam, but you should be pretty good. Alright, so we've taken a look at several different situations to where we would have to create seamless textures with different types of materials in different situations. And now what I want to do is take a look at one more situation to where, you know, maybe we don't have the specific type of tileable texture or seamless texture that we want, and it would just be a lot easier for us to go out and recreate it ourselves. So we have those tools available by creating tileable textures using 3D software like 3ds Max and ZBrush, and that's what we're going to start on in our next lesson. So I'll see you then.